Hey, good morning. Hopefully you can see my slides. I've got multiple windows of Zoom, etc. So, good morning.
Yes.
It's really nice to see a number of you on the call this morning, and people who I don't know. So this is the whole idea of today's conversation. I'm Simon Jude. I'm a senior lecturer in environmental decision making in SWE. And I've been involved with UKCRIC, which you've heard mentioned, and I'll explain a little bit in my slides as to what UKCRIC is, some of the activities that are underway at Cranfield, and how it links to DAFNI, because DAFNI is part of the wider UKCRIC initiative that we're involved with here in Cranfield. I lead on the Urban Observatory that we're establishing, and I'll talk a little bit about the Urban Observatory, DAFNI as a whole, some of the other aspects of UKCRIC that are going on at Cranfield, and then point to where this is going. So you saw Brian, for example, at the end talking about digital twins, and that will then link into some of the conversations we're starting to have on campus, and also link through to Steve's presentation. Bit of background behind today. DAFNI has funded a number of DAFNI champions, and I've been in one of these roles for about 6 months, and part of that work is to get engagement between researchers across Cranfield with DAFNI, and also make people in some of the schools that maybe weren't aware of UKCRIC a little bit more aware of UKCRIC and DAFNI. So a little bit of background from my perspective. I'm involved in establishing Urban Observatory at Cranfield, as you'll see in a few minutes. So we're putting sensor network across the campus to look at collection of real-time or near real-time data, looking at infrastructure, the environment, and how we as individuals and community interact with the environment. And also starting to bring in sensors from existing facilities such as movie and building sensors that we've already got. We've been doing this for, we've been using the campus for about 5 or 6 years as what we've called the Living Lab. This was the idea of Jim Harris and Gareth Ellis over in Estates. And so over the past 5 or 6 years, the campus started using the campus as this test bed for research. So you'll have seen, for example, biodiversity plots popping up around campus. Unfortunately, we missed them all last year. They're the most visible sign of the activities. There's a Living Lab working group that spans at the academic schools and facilities, and it's been identifying research projects that are both kind of blue skies academic work, but also activities that are more applied. So, for example, trying to help Gareth Ellis with some of the environmental policy on campus and the decarbonisation, etc. This initiative has also been involved in teaching, so it's about using the campus for teaching, both at the PhD level and at the MSc level. So we have this great microcosm of a city on the campus, and we own and have these really interesting facilities and assets. So, for example, here are some of our environmental management for business students visiting the CHP plant a couple of years ago. So this has been going on in the background, and then about, I'm trying to think now, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I was on a project looking at infrastructure interdependencies, and it was led by someone called, somebody at UCL called Brian Collins. And that research and another project called iBuild at the time, we were in a really interesting place because there was a spending review from government when George Osborne was in the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And what happened is Brian led this bid, £138 million of capital investment in new research infrastructure, to look at infrastructure research to support future investment in infrastructure, new infrastructure technologies. And that's called UKCRIC. So it's got this word collaboratorium in that everybody kind of winces when they see it. It's a very new one, but it's a bit of a mouthful. It's UK Collaboratorium for Research on Infrastructure and Cities. And as it says here, it's about how do we build better infrastructure, more sustainable infrastructure in the future. And this is a huge problem because of the levels of investment that are needed. The lead, it's as I say, it's £138 million, and there's also on top of that funding from universities and industry. There's about 14 universities in UKCRIC, and there's 1 or 2 more being added. There's 3 main strands, and I'll explain these in a moment. There are infrastructure research laboratories. So some of these, like Andrew Starr was on the call a minute ago, if he's still there. There's rail, for example, rail labs. There's labs looking at buried infrastructure and things like the water, distributed water infrastructure as well. Oh, Andrew's there. Hi, Andrew. There's also things like the Pearl Lab, which is this big lab for kind of how do people move around. You can actually put in there a railway platform or part of a sports stadium and see how people interact in these sort of environments. So there's the laboratories. We've then got the urban observatories. So as you'll see in a moment, there are 6 of these, and we've received £8 million of funding. So there's urban observatories are led by Newcastle. We've got Sheffield, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, and ourselves. So we're the one that everybody jokes we're not urban. So we have a different take on it. And then we also have DAFNI. So DAFNI is this compute facility. And as you'll see in a few slides time, we're now starting to talk about how we link these up to do really interesting research. So that's a bit about UKCRIC. The most visible sign of UKCRIC on campus is the new Water Sciences Urban Water Hub and Breakthrough Innovation Labs. So that's on the side of building 52. There's also been the Pilot Hall water treatment works that's been expanded as well. So when you walk past that building, that's about an £8 million investment from UKCRIC. So that's an example of the kind of scale of these laboratories. As I say, there's 6 urban observatories. We've received £8 million of funding, and we're currently bidding for further research. If you go to urbanobservatory.ac.uk, that's the main Newcastle Urban Observatory, so you'll see their data. And if you go to the find out about UKCRIC, you'll see about the different observatories. And the idea of these is we don't know a lot about urban environments, how they behave, systems of systems research, for example, as Brian was talking about. So it involves putting sensor networks out in these environments using low-cost IoT. As you'll see in a moment, we're just at the beginning of the journey at Cranfield. To put this into sensors perspective, this is the Newcastle website. We've been developing APIs so people can hook into the data. People can download the data as well as view it in real time over the web. Here you can see it says 742 million data records. They're actually up to about last time I looked, they were at 1.6 billion data records, and they have about 5,000 sensors feeding in data every minute into their system. And this has become really of interest in lockdown. So the work that's been going on in Newcastle has been feeding into the SAGE work, for example. So it's all very timely because we don't know how these urban systems work. So just very quickly give you a feel of what we're doing at Cranfield. We're setting up a range of sensors. We've had £1 million of investment from UKCRIC. We're looking at air quality on campus, and air quality sensors will be going out across the airfield. We've put in a water sensing network that looks at water levels in the brook and coming off the campus site, water quality, and also some really interesting kit in the water treatment works that allows us to look at bacteria in the water. So what's going on, what's coming off the campus, what's going through the water treatment works, what's coming out, and we can also use that to look at tracers. So we put tracers into the system. We're putting in about 500 shower sensors across halls of residence to look at behaviour change and water use. So how can we put in interventions and study the impacts of those? We're doing work around machine learning and acoustic monitoring of wildlife, which Steve has done some work on. We're doing work on buried infrastructure. So we're going to be able to put fibre optic sensors on buried infrastructure to see how they behave. And also, as you see in the slide, potentially we just brought a bit of kit where we can lay very long fibre optic cables under or within infrastructure. So for example, we might want to put one of those under a new runway at Cranfield. We could put it around the whole perimeter of the airfield, whole site, or we could put it along a piece of railway track or a new apron, for example, to look at how these behave. Also looking at very low cost sensors. So some of these sensors can cost like £20,000. Some of them will cost £2. What will those very low cost sensors provide us if we flood an area? And then we're also hooking into existing infrastructure. So things like the solar farm. We're about to put about 100 sensors in the water treatment works. We have building information systems on campus. So how can we bring those together? So some of the visual signs of this you'll have seen. This is one of our water sensors, which is over near Mitchell Hall on the main road. We've also set up test beds. So this is on building 146. So we've got some very high resolution air quality equipment, which then allows us to design our very own low cost and calibrate against these. So this has got things, for example, that are looking at very small, fine scale particulates. And we're going to do some work around bioaerosols in the future. We've also been doing very low cost sensors. So again, these very cheap sensors, what can you do with them? Things like this, you can bury them, collect the data. And then we've helped to support a COVID project. So there's a NERC urgency grant where we've deployed some of the sensors that were going to go on campus, have gone across the Oxford-Cambridge arc. So we're looking at how is lockdown affecting air quality. So for example, changes in schools behaviour, that sort of thing. And we're also supporting Gareth Ellis, people like Gareth. So we've got the solar farm, 2 megawatt solar farm. That's all internet connected, internet enabled, and I can access all the data on a phone app, but we're going to make that available via the Urban Observatory, so it can be used in research and teaching. So every panel of the solar farm, for example, provides data. Ipshan, I think, was on the call. We're in conversations with DARTEC, so there's lots of opportunities around DARTEC and some of the other initiatives on campus. So, for example, the DARTEC team have got this hangar with the 737 in it, and looking at maintenance and overhaul. They have some interest in sensing, putting environmental sensors in that environment. Can we look at some of the air quality issues, etc. in DARTEC? Also, can we use the inside of DARTEC for indoor-outdoor air quality studies? So some of the work there. And we've been integrating this. So one of the big challenges is integrating this data, developing a data platform. At the moment, this data platform and all the observatories are sat on their own individual platforms. And we've been developing data standards and structures so we can start to share the data, query the data, use it in models, digital twins. And this is where we see DAFNI coming into play. So there are conversations now about DAFNI, how DAFNI can be designed so that we can feed in some of our real-time data. So as Brian was saying, it's been designed primarily for models, static data, but now we're starting to have these real-time data sets. So we might want to put data at 1 second interval into DAFNI or once every 15 minutes to help support the development of digital twins. So we're starting to work with DAFNI to look at developing this kind of platform for the urban observatories. The other aspect, and Steve will talk about this, is there's some money on that Steve's received through his DAFNI role to provide compute and visualization facilities at Cranfield. So, okay, you've got the DAFNI, you've got the urban observatories, you've got the labs. How do we actually use that data in decision making and decision support? How do we make it alive, turn it into usable information? So Steve will talk about this in a little while, and there are a range of conversations going on at the moment around how we make this data available and make it accessible to other researchers. So finally, moving forward, the way we see this going is you have DAFNI as this kind of central platform. We might have the observatory data coming in, some of the lab data where we might have to do more complex processing, for example, the bacteria modeling, and then we can feed that into the visualization, APIs, apps on phones, and we can run things such as more integrated models, digital twins, etc. on the DAFNI platform. So hopefully that's provided a bit of an overview of UKCRIC and how we see DAFNI fitting in at Cranfield. The other aspect is supporting students where they've got compute challenges. So some of the DREAMS CDT students who are doing work on environmental risk and big data, we're starting to see students who are needing a serious compute support. And again, DAFNI's been very helpful there. So over to Steve, I think.